About 8 years after the original Sausage Party movie released back in 2016, we finally see the return of the anthropomorphic food items come back in their very mature and edgy ways. With Amazon coming in and ordering for the franchise to continue, we saw it come back to us in the form of a series on the Prime Video streaming platform. With 8 episodes being released all at once, at about 20 to 30 minutes long for each episode, it tells the story of what had happened after the events of the original 2016 film. When I went into watching this series, I decided to first off rewatch the original film because I hadn't seen it again since the first time in around 2016, and film wise I think it still kind of holds up. Watching it again was definitely helpful here as I got refamiliarized with the characters of course, but then had also refamiliarized myself with the attitudes that they had all gotten, and of course I didn't forget about the orgy scene at the end. But yeah, if one were to be wanting to watch the new series here and they hadn't seen the movie already, I would definitely recommend watching the movie first, as I think that it is still enjoyable to this day. But now with that out of the way, let's get into the series that served as a sequel to the original film and see how they went about it. This recap is going to be a little bit lengthy, but each episode will be run fairly quick as each of them were about just 20 to 30 minutes long each. And with that, I do gotta give a warning ahead. Spoilers will be getting talked about here. Alright, so in the first episode, we see that the foods are in a huge battle against multiple human beings outside of the Shopwell's grocery store from the original film, while they end up defeating the humans here, which they call Humies. One of the major characters from the film beforehand, Lavash, ends up being dead at the beginning of the series. His lover, Sammy Bagel, is distraught about this passing throughout the rest of the series, which we'll see it come into play later on. But with that, going back to what we were just talking about, the foods, after hailing victory against the Humies, go on to have another scene full of orgies. Why the series chose to go on and do this again, I don't know. It was sort of funny again, I'll give them that, but this time around it just felt kind of unnecessary. But I guess they put it in this early on in the series so that people probably wouldn't be expecting it to come on later. But as this orgy is taking place, raindrops start falling from the sky and start hurting the foods all around, and as they all try to take cover, a flood comes in and washes most of them out, but still having many of them survive, like this grain of rice here, having this moment take place.
Somebody help me! Oh, thank you! Thank you, thank you!
No, thank you, Sticky Rice. I love these things.
You orange bastard!
Keep this scene in mind as you will eventually see that teeth will become valuable as a currency later on. But as we move on to the next scene, the character Gum from the original film, in his attempt to try and save some of the foods being washed away out there, he unfortunately sacrifices himself too much and passes away in front of his group of the original cast. With that, most of the foods decide to go back into the store to seek shelter from the rain, with a worried Frank and Brenda looking upon them. And on the other hand, Frank's good friend Barry was one of the foods that got washed away, and he is off in his own little adventure for survival. Episode 2 comes along, and in this one we see Barry return to the grocery store to Frank and Brenda, and the three of them head off into an adventure to get answers out of a Humie as to what the falling water out of the sky was. So they head off, and the Sammy Bagel guy stays behind, and this guy, when he roasts a couple of people for waking him up, he has them laughing at his jokes and he starts to become super self-absorbed, which we'll see later on in the series. In the meantime, Frank, Barry, and Brenda head off to find a Humie and end up killing a couple of them except for one, and we see that the Humies, can also essentially be controlled by having one of the foods go up their ass and have them do things. Oh, and just like in the original film, the humans can understand the foods when they are under the influence of the bath salts. So with that, the trio of hot dog essentials bring the lone Humie back out to the grocery store, have him explain to everybody what rain is, and then everybody evacuates the damaged / falling grocery store. It is then seen that Barry wants to kill the Humie, and they decide to have an event of Burning Man surround the killing of him in the next episode, which is episode 3. This one can just be chopped up to it being a little fun episode where Barry hosts the event to burn the Humie, but Frank and Brenda end up saving him because he had helped them already in explaining the concept of rain in the previous episode, and in this one, when the crew had fought off a crow with the help of the Humie, Frank and Brenda had now seen him as being useful to them. While Barry still wanted to kill the Humie, Frank and Brenda go behind his back and save him, and take the Humie back to a treehouse and let that be his place to be for the time being. This episode was also prominent in that it showed the Foodtopia society start to use teeth as currency, in which this orange fruit character, Julius, begins to make a business out of the teeth currency, and then starts leveling himself up with this new and growing status. And with that, we roll into episode 4, where in this one a conundrum is seen to take place, where even though Frank and Brenda want to help out the Humie, they don't want to give him food because obviously they are associated with food, but as we all know, humans gotta eat. So what do Frank and Brenda come up with? Well, they bring a human foot for him to eat, and at the end of the episode, when the credits are rolling, the Humie eats it in sadness and disappointment, but is then seen to sort of enjoy it near the end. But in this episode, this is also where things start to pick up in the society of Foodtopia. Teeth is now seen to be of value, and it starts to have some of the foods begin to do crimes, such as stealing teeth from other foods. This then has a police force get made, where we even see a humorous montage of a cops parody take place.
Coming after you when you steal that tooth. Bad coming after you, and you still not too bad foods, bad foods. Coming after you, and you still not
The juice is loose!
Probably my favorite scene of the whole series. I always do like a cops parody. But with that, a court also gets made where we see that some conditions of some foods force them to do these crimes in order to continue living, while the rich orange Julius takes advantage of this to bring in high revenue. Frank and Brenda take notice of the disastrous situations that some of these foods are having, and then decide to take it upon themselves to establish some leadership in the society of Foodtopia. They announce some plans of sharing the wealth of teeth, using kind of the concept of taxation, but before they could go on any further, Julius the Orange fights back against it in front of everybody. He goes at it in a political manner and deviously gives out multiple points and statements as to why he would be a better candidate for being a leader in Foodtopia, and the foods listening to him eat it all up, no pun intended. With the majority of people on Julius' side, we then go on to episode 5, where here it begins with an anecdotal piece showing how an egg family gets destroyed from the current state of Foodtopia. This story here being documented by Wiener Hotzdog here is then followed by Sammy Bagel getting arrested, but when court time comes around for him, Julius the Orange pays off the judge and then lets Sammy know that he himself freed him and manipulates him to have his own show through his production, and thus use that new influence from Sammy to be able to portray Julius himself as a good food. Frank and Brenda, after seeing the corruption take place in front of them at the court, then have a chat with Hume at the treehouse, where Hume then tells them about how Western and American politics tends to work and to see if the same effect would happen in the world of Foodtopia. Hume gives out an idea to Frank and Brenda that to perhaps get the upper hand on everything against the rich Julius, that they might have to go ahead and steal a bunch of teeth to be able to compete against the Orange. While Brenda chooses not to do anything immoral in any way, Frank goes off and steals a bunch of teeth on his own, Fast and Furious style, and later on, back at the treehouse, Frank reveals to Brenda about his way of gaining the mass amount of teeth, and Brenda condemns his actions right there and then, and has Frank either choose to go the moral way in this political campaign and go with her, or to choose to continue taking this criminalistic path of gaining leadership and to stay with the Hume. Frank chooses the way of the Hume and stays back and sees a disappointed Brenda leave to end off that episode. Episode 6 comes up, and this one actually has a warning at the beginning of the episode where the showrunners tell us that the episode had contained a scene that was so graphic that Amazon had asked them to issue us a warning, and that message there was the warning itself. So with that, we knew that we were in for a treat. At first I thought that it was probably going to be like an intense mauling scene where one of the foods was going to be absolutely destroyed by like a dog or something, and that it would be like gory in a sense, or maybe some type of violation scene, one kind of like that happened in the restroom and broom scene in 13 Reasons Why. If you know what I'm talking about, then you know. I don't think that it would have been something of the sexual sort, as we had already seen orgies take place in this universe on camera, but whatever would have taken place in this episode, we would just have to tune in and see. So the episode has Frank and the Hume be conversing with each other after Brenda had left them both in the treehouse from the previous episode, and in there we learn that the Hume's real name is Jack, and then we get this little clip here.
Every time I think of Jack, I'll think of you.
And yup, as you may have gathered there, the two were falling in love with each other, and you could probably have already guessed what the warning sign from the beginning of this episode may have been for. And if you took a guess at saying that the Hume/Human Jack here was going to be having sex on screen with Frank the hot dog, well, you got that right, because that is exactly what they did. No genitalia was shown, only a little bit of the Hume's balls were revealed on screen, but if you want to try to figure out what was exactly being shown in the sex scene here, it's mostly what you would imagine a human making love to a hot dog would be doing, and with them going at it in the montage for about a minute in the episode, we see that in the meantime, Brenda had reconciled with Barry while she was out, and when she decided to reveal to Barry that the Hume was up at a treehouse with Frank at the moment, they went back to the location to go and talk to them, and Brenda and Barry caught Frank in the sex act with the Hume, and without getting too explicit here, the Hume Jack had essentially finished on Frank himself right in front of Brenda and Barry. Being confronted by them, the Hume and Frank run away, but Frank, being disappointed in himself, decides to run away from Jack and go back to Foodtopia, where the leader of it was now going to be picked on the election night. Brenda shows up ready to go up against Julius the Orange, and right in the nick of time, Frank shows up as well and goes out onto the stage with Brenda. When the debate between the hot dog duo and Julius takes place, the aforementioned pair start to begin to argue with each other, and Brenda reveals to everybody that Frank had sex with a Hume, to which it shocks everybody, and the sabotage between the duo then leads to the majority of the crowd to elect Julius as the now new leader of Foodtopia. That then leads us to episode 7, where actually it begins with Julius looking at the front of a mirror, and it appears as if he is having a battle within himself, like two personalities going at each other for that short moment, almost reminiscent of what we saw of the Green Goblin in the original Spider-Man film back in 2002. He seemingly worried Julius puts his happy face on and goes out to a crowd, to the dismay of what we as the viewers had just seen. After the election results, the defeated Frank and Brenda have a short conversation, where Frank then goes back to the woods to cut ties with the Hume, and as this takes place, Brenda is having a walk outside and then hears a whimpering Julius through the vents and goes to check out what is going on. As Brenda enters the room, she is shocked to see that Julius is tied up, but then then, this is where the kicker comes in. Somebody opens the door who appears to be behind Julius's entrapment, and it turns out to be the grain of rice that we had seen earlier in the show. Her name, being Jerry Rice, comes out and reveals herself to Brenda and explains what exactly is going on. Jerry Rice tells Brenda that when the floods took place, she had seen the selfishness of the foods being every food for themselves, and then after learning about Barry's way of controlling humies through entering their private parts, Jerry had then come up with the idea of perhaps trying to get into the body of another food like Julius the Orange and see if they could be controlled to do whatever she wanted, and it worked, as we all had seen that the physically corrupted mind and body of Julius was now being used to take over the society that was a Foodtopia. With Jerry's mind and control of Julius's orange body, almost nothing would stop them from getting to the top, much to Julius's dismay. And with Jerry revealing all of this to Brenda, she had felt that now it was necessary to try and kill her for learning of this information and backstory. Brenda and Jerry Rice, who then enters Julius's orange body, have to fight their lives in that apartment looking building, and later on, when Frank tries to go look for Brenda, he comes across entering the room and sees the ending of their fight. But unfortunately for the hot dog duo, as we go on to see, Jerry had tricked Brenda at the last second and turned on the sink to now soak the bottom part of her hot dog bun body, thus then here killing her in the process, and left slowly to die in the presence of her lover, Frank. The police force comes in and assumes that Frank was the one that murdered Brenda and take him away. And with that shocking death and ending, we then move on to the 8th and final episode of the series, where it begins with Frank having the final sentencing of him be capital punishment, aka the death penalty. And this narrative of Frank being the murderer gets pushed further by Jerry Rice inside of Julius's body, who had now deplatformed Sammy Bagel's show because he didn't want to speak badly of Frank in the public. Sammy goes to Barry to talk about them believing that Frank wouldn't be capable of murdering Brenda, and as they are having a walk, they come across Wiener Hatzog, the documentarian that we had seen earlier in the show, and he comes to them with a stunning revelation. While Brenda and the Julius body were fighting in the kitchen area with the sink, Wiener managed to capture footage of Jerry Rice turning on the sink, and with that footage it would be enough to exonerate Frank and prove his innocence and not have him be put to the death sentence. With Frank now being put to death by way of the grill, the duo of Sammy and Barry go into the woods and convince Humi to help them out in order to save Frank. Returning to Foodtopia, Humi throws the duo via a frisbee, and a whole battle between Julius's police force and security takes place, with Sammy and Barry trying to get the footage out there to the public as Frank gets closer and closer to being grilled to death. The heroic duo managed to get the footage out there on the TVs for everyone to see, and everybody learns about Frank's non-existent involvement in the murder of Brenda Bunsen, and they also see the truth behind Julius's body and the grain of rice that is behind it all. With that, a furious Jerry Rice pushes over the cans that are dropping Frank into the grill, and Frank drops straight into the heat, but the citizens of Foodtopia come together to tip over the grill and save Frank. With the Foodtopia natives angry at Jerry Rice, it all comes down to a conversation between her and Frank, in which Frank actually decides to forgive her, even though she was the cause of Brenda's death, and the reasoning to this forgiveness is that he wanted to set an example of forgiveness to this level in front of everybody, in the hopes that it would make the town's food of Foodtopia become better foods all around. And as the sweet moment settles in between the folks over in the new society of Foodtopia, including Jerry Rice herself, she then gets scooped up by the crow from earlier in the show. A new election takes place to pick the new leader of Foodtopia, and Frank gets himself the upper hand by bringing in Humi and showing that foods and humans can perhaps live alongside each other, as the foods themselves have shown to not be able to fully cooperate amongst just themselves. And with Frank now being the new presumed leader, the series gets to its ending with this last funny line.
Is that the Humi Brenda said you fucked?
No?
As the camera pans out, we then see that a drone is flying above everyone, and the episode and series ends off there. Overall, I enjoyed the series. I'm glad that they didn't go with 40-minute long episodes, because I'm not gonna lie, I'm starting to get tired of a bunch of shows out there having 40+ minute long episodes in a season, just being all dropped all at once. I don't know if that's the zoomer brain in me being thankful for that, but for a show like this one, a 20 to 30 minute runtime for each episode seemed to have been perfect here. I'm also glad that they kept the mature rating. I mean, that one was mostly a given here, as the movie from 2016, that gained its aura from having that R rating. As for that one sex scene in the series, I mean, I don't think it was necessary. It was clearly made just for the shock factor, which I don't think that the show needed here, unless if they were trying to make this moment here go viral, which even that I don't think it did, because I didn't necessarily see anybody talk about it in the general space on social media. Prime Video did put up a clip leading up to that moment onto their X account, but it didn't seem like anybody cared, and when people posted about the scene, the post didn't really gain that much traction either that one would expect with having such a shocking scene like that take place in an animated show. But yeah, I mean, I guess that happened, and it is what it is. For the series though, I did find it interesting how they went about a political route, especially seeing how we're right at around election time for the year 2024, and I don't know if they did this on purpose, but it is pretty funny how they made an orange character seem like an asshole throughout most of the series, and then we have a political figure here in real life, which many people see as an orange skinned guy that is just an asshole. I don't know, I feel like the parallels there were just too good, even though in the end, the orange character, Julius, actually turns out to be innocent and not have been an entirely corrupted political figure. But moving on from that political aspect, I think it's weird that at the beginning of the show that they had killed off Lavash before the scenes had even started rolling. It was just kind of like they treated him like a random, and his death only really comes into play a bit near the end when his bagel lover guy, Sammy Bagel, decides to do what's right. And on that note, let me go on this guy for a bit. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I hated this Sammy Bagel guy throughout the series. Character-wise decisions aside, why is this dude's microphone and audio level so low? Anytime he talks, I could barely hear what he's saying.
Do you mind? It's so loud, I can't even hear my own self-hating thoughts. My name, of course, is Sammy Bagel.
Sammy, hand me the spork.
You were serious about that?
No, that's not me messing with any audio levels, that's just how he sounds throughout the show. And going on to the character's character, I think they were trying to make him look like a narcissistic asshole that just cares about his fame and platform/opportunities that he's given. But man, dude, they just kept showing that that's all he cared about, because he would always come off as an insufferable prick when talking about how the world would perceive him and whatever he would be doing.
There would need to be a dazzling performance or two to keep the food's attention wrapped prior to the grand finale, and that's where I come in.
Everybody's watching me, it's all about the Sammy.
Wow, hey, you got quite an audience there. Can I have a turn?
That freaking Brenda had pulled ahead. I stand to lose everything.
Oh, well, that's a shame.
Which means you stand to lose everything.
What? Hey, how do I stay relevant?
Yeah, dude, screw this guy. If they had killed him in this show, I wouldn't have cared. Instead, they killed off the homie Gum, which I'm not opposed to his death actually. He did die a hero, and I feel like if they had kept him in alive the whole show, then all of the other foods' curiosity and ignorance in the real world wouldn't have been a theme throughout the series, as Gum didn't know a lot about the real world. So his death here wasn't entirely bad, and probably could have even been seen as needing to happen in order to have the rest of the events of the show take place as they did. They did kill my girl Brenda though, which I don't think should have happened or felt like it was even necessary here. Not gonna lie, voice performance wise, I think that the actress behind her voice, Kristen Wiig, is one of the best voice performers in this whole franchise. The way she talks just seems so natural and everything, and always rolls the lines well when speaking. So it's unfortunate to see that they just killed off the Brenda character. I don't know what they're planning to do in the future. I assume that they're gonna be doing a sequel to this series, as the first season of Foodtopia here ends off with this shot of this mysterious drone. So obviously they got some plans for that. How they go about it, I don't know. I would assume that next up, they just go ahead and do another full season of the show, because it would be kind of weird to go back and do another movie. The movie to show to movie order of a franchise like this would be kind of weird for any new viewers to come in and catch up on. Whatever it is they choose to do though, I hope that some of the animation can be done a bit better. Listen, I don't like to criticize special effects or animations or stuff like that, because I know that it requires a lot of work from hardworking human beings, but sometimes throughout the series here, I was taken out of the show a bit when watching a couple of the scenes, because it felt like I was playing a PS2 video game and was watching of some sort of cutscene that takes place right before I get back put into the action of the video game. Like, let me show you what I mean. I don't know if it'll shine through to y'all like it did to me, but let me just show you this clip here and tell me that this isn't a video game-esque type of scene that would take place right before the camera POV will shift right back onto your gaming character.
Gotcha. She's out. I'm free.
Yeah, but for the most part, it wasn't that distracting. I was still able to enjoy most of the series without thinking about the graphics and or animations. But like I said, there were some moments that took me out of the story for a bit. Almost kind of like with the way that some of the scenes in 2022's Avatar movie had seemed like it was coming straight out of a PS5 cutscene in a video game. It feels like I'm going in too harsh on the animation here. I mean, just compare the series' footage that was being made from the past couple of years to that from the original film in 2016. Watch them back to back and you'll be able to see why I'm harping on about this for a bit. But yeah, either way, the story was still told, and that's mostly what matters here. How the creators are going to go ahead with the story, I'm not sure. Maybe we'll see some type of industrial revolution take place with the foods as the society here begins to take effect. Maybe they'll use Tahumi to connect them with other humans out there in the real world, and we can see food and human come and live together. Who knows? But I'll probably tune in to see what they got going on. All I ask for is no more sex scenes, dude. Unless it feels like it's absolutely necessary to tell the story in an effective way, where we would have to see the scene take place, then I guess you can have a go at it. Otherwise, leave it out, as I think minimizing that could be better off for everybody. Or I don't know, maybe there's some people that are higher up in the industry that want these scenes to be animated at this level, and that will be the only way that they would greenlight projects for the Sausage Party franchise. If that's the case, then I guess sure, go on ahead and give us another warning at the beginning of another episode, man. Nah, better yet, just randomly drop it on us. Why not? Screw the warnings. Genuinely surprise us with it just coming out of nowhere. Screw it, dude. But just try to portray your overall story in a better way for your next project, because these fools over at Rotten Tomatoes are just dunking on it, both critics and audience members. Like I said though, I myself enjoyed it for the most part. Would I recommend watching it for someone that hasn't seen the original Sausage Party movie? No. If you're a fan of the original film, then probably yeah, sure. If you want to kill about 3 to 4 hours, it's not the worst thing in the world to watch. You get to see the continuation of the 2016 film and get some clever and funny moments as you watch along. But in watching it, just be ready for a whole lot of degeneracy in there. And with that, that'll be the end of this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you in another one.